Well, time now to take another look at the morning's papers. Here with me to review them this morning are Marianne Hotter and Yasmin Alabai-Brown. So welcome back to both of you. And Marianne, we're going to kick off with a story that we didn't have time to get onto last hour. So viewers have been waiting for an hour, dying to hear more about it. So talk us through it. It's the front page of The Eye, isn't it? And the headline is British national security fears after Chinese spyware, in inverted commas, found in government car. So do we have much detail here?
So some of the details are indeed, Anna, as you guess, obscured on account of this being an active element of British counter-espionage, I guess, and security around diplomats and politicians. But fundamentally, what's been revealed to journalists at The Eye is that what's doing kind of a really forensic deconstruction of cars that are used by diplomats and politicians here in the UK, they found secret SIM cards that are planted, that have been planted into the sealed components that are installed into cars by manufacturers that have been produced in China. So these are Chinese SIM cards, and obviously modern cars are basically computers on wheels. They're transferring data back and forth all the time. And so there's a really big challenge around how you create vehicles that aren't shedding information or perhaps being, bled of information by agencies and actors in the global scene that you don't necessarily want to know all the granular detail of where our politicians are, where our diplomats are travelling. And the kind of big question is, well, how do you protect against that? And the other question is, given that we know that China is doing this, given that we know that because they're doing this through car manufacturers in sealed parts that are being put into mass production, into vehicles that are being then shipped across the world, and then they pick up the data from the vehicles that they identify as being used by personnel of interest, is it time now that we actually officially, explicitly designate China as a systemic threat, as a nation of systemic threat to UK integrity and to our democracy?
Interesting question, and we'll leave you on that shrug as we pause and move on. But a really interesting story that, and we're going to the FT next, aren't we, Yasmin? The story that you've picked out is about house prices and what direction they're likely to go in the months ahead.
Yes, and nobody should be surprised that in the condition situation we're all in, with the cost of living crisis, with the economy. The spasms that we've been through. But the story is that the rate of increase of house prices is lower than it used to be. So apparently, according to the FT, in December, it's gone down, the rate has gone down from about 4.6 to 2%. But maybe I'm just being naive, but I think we've been on a kind of mad ride on house prices. They've been going up and up and up, and younger people in particular just can't afford to get on the ladder. And we've got so greedy about how the house prices will deliver these increases. So perhaps, maybe I'm being naive. I think that's no bad thing if an adjustment takes place. The flat I live in, I bought for £23,000. It is appalling how much it's worth now, quite appalling. And so I don't necessarily think I feel pessimistic about this, but of course in the wider economic world, it is seen as a problem.
Well, yes, you're right. Anyone wanting to get on the housing ladder might be encouraged. I guess there are some people that will worry about negative equity, that their mortgage payments are worth so much more than the cost of the property itself. But certainly one to watch and see whether or not those predictions bear out. Let's move on, shall we, to the next story, Marianne, that you wanted to talk about. And actually, it's one of the little news in briefs at the bottom of the front page of the Daily Telegraph. And it's talking about the energy support scheme. We know about the one that is in place for households, but the one for businesses as well is being looked at again post the spring, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And it, to an extent, feeds into Yasmin's kind of questions around house prices, because we're really seeing a kind of some seismic shifts in the way that our economy will be functioning now and into the future. And part of that is costs to business, and then the knock-on impact for, you know, their ability to keep going and maintain people's jobs. So Rishi Sunak and the Chancellor have sat down. Apparently, they've agreed the costs in principle, which means that from April, the details are going to be announced next week, but from April, there's an anticipation that the energy bill support, so the kind of the subsidies that are being paid out to businesses at the moment to help them cover their energy costs, are going to be reduced by 85%. So in the 6 months up until now, £18 billion has been spent supporting UK businesses with their energy costs. And the hope is, or the modelling, the projections and plan that Sunak is working on, is that energy bill support cost to the government will be capped at around £5 billion from April. That is a pretty huge reduction in support for businesses. And we know that small and medium-sized businesses, as well as larger businesses that have high energy costs and energy demands, are already feeling squeezed, that people are facing redundancies, that, you know, all the conversation around public sector pay and the strikes is echoed in private sector pay as well. People who are working for private employers may or may not be members of unions. I hope that they are, but even so, they're also feeling real-term squeezes on their incomes, and businesses as kind of entities are feeling the squeeze in terms of their cash flow, their profit margins, and whether they can continue trading. There is no magic money tree. They can't just keep printing money, but to transfer the burden of costs onto private companies and householders isn't sustainable. I mean, we're coming into this with 12 years of austerity, and so people's resilience to cope with these shocks, to cope with this pressure of on their finances, it's not sustainable. There's going to be huge negative outcome that will colour the way that our country can grow for a decade or more.
Huge challenges, you're absolutely right. And I think businesses also wanted clarity because it's very hard for them to plan. But there has been some optimism to see that wholesale gas prices seem to be coming down. And I guess the feeling is that energy bills tend to be lower over the summer months. Just very briefly on that.
Yes, you're right. So perhaps we've seen the worst of the peak of the energy costs. And as you say, in the spring and summer period, energy costs, because heating costs are lower. However, to kind of counter that, the war in Ukraine is not going to be wrapped up anytime soon. Russia know very clearly now, perhaps, how the international markets will respond when they turn the tap on or turn the tap off. So they've got more leverage, and we have more insecurity and risk.
So ongoing pressures there. Yasmin, let's come on to you. The story that you have picked out next is from The Times, and this is about, it's private clinics on the high street to tackle cancer scan backlog. So fill us in.
Well, I mean, you know, a huge number of cancer patients, actually going back to the lockdown years, the diagnosis is being delayed, which delays treatment and so on. So the idea is, and I think I'm right in saying that Labour doesn't look too unkindly upon such solutions, that to bring in the private sector to speed up the diagnostics is what this government wants to do. My only anxiety, which you would expect from somebody on the left, is that there is increasing evidence that our government is very keen on the private sector getting a larger and larger slice of the national health